Number of tests required for advancement. To advance an ability exponent 1 rank, a player must accumulate a certain number of routine, difficult and challenging tests. Advancing skills. Exponent 1 to 4. Advancing an exponent 1 to 4 skill requires a number of routine tests equal to the exponent. Also for exponent 1 to 4, a character needs difficult tests equal to half the exponent, or challenging tests equal to his exponent divided by 3, rounded up. Exponent 5 plus. For skill exponents 5 and higher, a character needs difficult tests equal to half the skill exponent, and challenging tests equal to 1/3 of the exponent, rounded up. Routine tests are not used to advance a skill exponent 5 or higher. In order to advance Carpentry B3, I'd need 3 routine tests, ob 1 or 2, plus either 2 difficult tests, ob 3, or 1 challenging test, ob 4. To advance a B6 sword skill, I'd need 3 tests ob 5 or 6 to meet my difficult test requirements, and 2 tests ob 7 to get my challenging tests. This is not easily done. Tests of that difficulty don't come along very often, and when they do, they're usually life or death. Advancing stats. Routine tests don't count for the advancement of stats. Players must get high obstacle tests in order to advance them. Difficult and challenging tests are required, even at low exponents. Pass or fail. With few exceptions, tests for advancement are earned whether the character was successful or not. Pass or fail, a test is earned. The exceptions: perception, resources, and faith. Perception, resources, and faith tests must be successful to count towards advancement. Advancing attributes. Reflexes and mortal wound advances their parent stats increase the applicable average. Health and steel advances skills and are not dependent on their parent stats after character burning. Faith, grief, greed, and hate all advance as skills, requiring routine tests to advance exponents 1 to 4. Greed has a special rule. Routine tests always count, even for greed exponents 5 to 10, and filling up any 2 of the 3 test categories advances greed. Advancing circles and resources. Circles advances like a skill. When advancing your base circles ability, be sure to tally all the affiliation and reputation dice rolled to determine the actual level of the test. Resources advances like a skill as well, but only successful tests count. Experience log. Listed with each ability on the character sheet is an experience log. Use this to note the tests earned for advancement for individual abilities. Handing out tests. Both the GM and players are responsible for remembering tests. However, sometimes things get hectic during the game. It's often best to take 5 minutes to review the session after it's over and make sure that players noted their tests. Applicable situations. Tests are only awarded to players when their characters act in appropriate and applicable in-game situations. Everything else counts as practice. Soliciting tests, or test-mongering. Tests are very important to the game, but badgering the GM for them is very bad form. Can I test? Can I? Sometimes a player will wish to have his character roll dice for something at an inappropriate juncture in play. It's the GM's role to pace events and keep play flowing evenly. Therefore, he can have the player hold off on making a test until the appropriate time, or have him stay his hand entirely. Test-mongering also involves pestering the GM for a particular test. I need a routine. Can I get a routine test? Dude, it's a dragon. I don't think there are going to be any routine tests. The GM's job here is to say flat out no. Let the difficulty of the tests arise organically, not at the player's requests, so his character can advance. It makes for a much more interesting game. Series of rolls equals 1 test. Occasionally in game, we have situations where players are testing the same ability over and over again. Martial and social conflicts being the prime examples. In any instance where an ability is tested multiple times to determine the outcome, only 1 test is earned towards advancement. Do not note a test for every punch thrown. A player generally takes the highest obstacle test from the encounter. However, if the character is in need of a particular test to advance the ability, a test for advancement should be noted as soon as the appropriate obstacle comes up. This is only done for series tests during which the character would advance, i.e. is 1 test away from going up. I just learned something. When the requirement is met, the exponent immediately advances. It doesn't matter if it's in the middle of a sword fight or while researching a new spell. Once the test is earned, the ability increases 1 rank. There's nothing more pleasing to my ears than a player crowing, I just learned something. Wipe the slate clean. After the ability has advanced, all extra tests are discarded. You start over with a clean slate. Converting or substituting tests. What if my character is one routine test from advancing his skill, but has tons of difficult tests? I can just convert a test, right? No. Hard and fast rule, players cannot convert or substitute tests, ever. Advancement for graduated tests. When logging graduated tests for advancement, the obstacle is always 1. These tests always count as routine. Advancement for versus tests. For versus tests, use the number of successes your opponent generated plus any obstacle penalties as the obstacle for the test when consulting the dice versus obstacle table at the beginning of this chapter. Helping and advancement. Helping dice add to the dice total for the acting character, making it harder to earn difficult or challenging tests for advancement. For example, my character's got to patch up this hole in the cistern before all the water drains out. The GM sets the obstacle at 2. I want to get this done as quickly as possible and ensure success, so I ask one of the other players, can you help? His character has engineering B2. The GM agrees that this is an applicable skill. The player passes me a die and I add it to my skill. Without his help, the test would have counted as difficult for advancement, 3D versus OB2. With his help, the test counts as routine, 4D versus OB2. Helpers learn. Though he doesn't roll any dice, a character who helps earns a test for advancement, for stats, skills, or attributes. The level of the test is the same as if he had tested against the obstacle with his own ability. If your skill is B2 and you help with an OB5 test, you earn a challenging test for advancement, regardless of how many dice the player you're helping rolls. If you're helping with a stat on an unskilled test, the player does not earn a test towards his aptitude for learning the skill. Since he is helping with his stat, he earns a test for advancing his stat if the obstacle is appropriate. Forks and advancement. Like helping dice, forks can reduce the difficulty of a test for purposes of advancement. Forks count towards the dice total when consulting the dice rolled versus obstacle table. Relying on forks all the time can stymie character growth, and the abilities that are forked into another do not earn tests towards advancement. Only the primary ability earns the test. Advantage dice and advancement. Advantages and bonus dice count towards the dice total when determining the difficulty of tests for advancement. I have a B4 crossbow skill. This means that OB3 tests are normally difficult for me. My superior quality crossbow gives me plus 1D to my skill tests. The addition of the bonus die increases my die pool to B5. When rolling 5 dice, an OB3 is routine, not difficult. Arta and advancement. Dice from Arta never count towards the total dice rolled for purposes of advancement. If you have a skill of B4 and add 3 dice from Arta, the test still counts as if you rolled 4 dice. Social skills and advancement. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in our performances we neglect the dice. Well, this heading here is to remind you to roll the dice. After an impassioned speech, set an obstacle and test a skill. Then note the test for advancement. Role-playing performance is part of the game, but not independent of the dice mechanics. Practice. In Burning Wheel, characters can undertake a practice regimen to polish their skills. This aids characters in advancing their skills. Practice helps fill the gaps in characters' active experience. The drawback to practice is it requires substantial in-game time investment. Practice time comes in many forms: exercising, studying, even trying out your skills on your friends. The cycle is the length of time that a character needs to practice in order to earn one test. Hours indicates the actual time per day that the character must spend practicing during the cycle. If a character maintains the daily time requirement for one practice cycle, he earns the listed test for that skill for the purposes of advancement. You cannot practice the same skill more than once per cycle. For example, if my character practices his carpentry, a craftsman skill, for 3 hours every day for a year, he earns a routine test for advancement at the end of a year. Being a craftsman is hard.